Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Caesar Carino, your host, and our guest today is Esther Melvin Danals. Esther, we're pleased to have you for 3 or 4 reasons. First and foremost, because you are an integral part of the entire fabric of Wadsworth, but then you have 3 definite areas of history that we want to talk about. First and foremost, we want to talk about Esther Melvin Danals, because you in your own right, when you were probably, well, how old were you when you were the first queen in Wadsworth?
14 years old.
14 years old, just a little girl. And
right.
You were chosen to be the queen for the sesquicentennial, which was 125th anniversary in 1939. Is that correct?
Well, it was the 125th anniversary.
Right, 125th
Right.
anniversary in
Yes.
1939. The other thing that we have from Esther Melvin Danals is the fact that your father, Dr. Danals, was the first chiropractor in Wadsworth, I believe. Is that correct? Way back in the 30s, about 60, 65 years ago or better.
That's right.
More than that, perhaps even. And the third is that your husband was the mayor of Wadsworth. And I guess there's another 4th reason and a 5th and a 6th reason, but the other reason is that your legacy, that is your children, have been just outstanding citizens of Wadsworth. Your son Steve, Dr. Steve, is a chiropractor, followed in your husband's footsteps and his grandfather's footsteps. Your daughter is city council representative or council person from the 2nd Ward, Marcia Danals Lehman. And we just have a lot of things to talk about. Why don't we start with you, because you're our focus today. You're our focus. You're not somebody's wife and you're not someone's mother. You're just Esther Melvin, way back, well, let's see, about 1925, is that right?
That's correct.
1925. I get these dates sometimes right and sometimes I get them wrong, but we have been talking with people who are in their 80s and 90s, but we are also trying to get representatives of all of the mayors, and since you had 3 of these elements of history, we thought we would get you in despite the fact that you're still a very young person.
Oh, thank you.
Very young person, Esther. You're born where?
I was born on a farm in Greenville, Pennsylvania.
And so that we can have this for history, no, it's 1925. Was there a day?
Oh, yes. It was April 28th, 1925.
April 28th, 1925. You have brothers and sisters?
I have none, unfortunately.
None, no brothers and sisters. And your father was not always a chiropractor, was he?
No, not almost, but he grew up on a farm, and his father was in custom butchering, and that's how he started his livelihood.
You know, Esther, I bet there are people who 50 years from now or 20 years from now, when our history is written again, will not know what custom butchering is. That's almost like the kids in New York not knowing that eggs come from chickens. They think they come from supermarkets. Tell us what custom butchering is and what your father did in custom butchering and how he became a chiropractor as a result of that. Now, not the butcher, understand, but just as a result of that.
All right. Well, the way I understand it is they did custom butchering for meat markets, and then they delivered the meat to the meat markets in the towns around their area.
There wasn't any refrigeration in those days, particularly in 1925, because refrigerators were just barely invented. So they had to do it fast and get it out into the community almost immediately, otherwise it would spoil.
That's right.
Is there a connection between the fact that he was a custom butcher and the fact that he became a chiropractor? Is there a connection there?
Well, it was heavy work because he did a lot of lifting, and he was having problems with his back, and he learned about a chiropractor in Sharon, Pennsylvania, which was, well, in those days, it would be quite far to go.
How far would it have been?
Well, probably 20 miles.
20 miles, but it was horse and buggy probably, or a very old car.
Old cars.
And poor roads.
Poor roads, very poor roads. And so he received help with the treatments he was getting, and he became interested in finding out more about chiropractic, and thought it might be something he would like to pursue as a profession for him. And I was just a year old when we left the farm and came to Akron. And so that's how I've been in this area all my life.
You came to Akron, and the reason that you came to Akron was what, Esther?
To go to college.
Where?
At the Standard College of Chiropractic.
In Akron.
In Akron.
The chiropractic at that time probably did not have the same degree of sophistication that it has now.
That's right.
Son, Dr. Steve, had probably many, many more years of training than his father, Dr. Bob Danals, and before him, Dr. Melvin.
Well, more than his grandfather, Dr. Melvin, but his father had equal.
He had the
equal training.
Same training, okay. I thought perhaps as time went on that.
Well, it grew into, I think it's a 6 or 7 year course now.
And what was it with when your father was there?
It was 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And he probably, in those 2 years, was able to amass enough knowledge to treat the entire city of Wadsworth. Everyone went to Dr. Melvin, and everyone loved him. He came to Wadsworth, why?
He liked the looks of Wadsworth, the small town, and actually it was in the Depression days, and
Boy, things were tough too, weren't they?
it was very tough. It was very difficult to start a new profession like that. And so he opened up his office 3 days a week in Rittman and 3 days a week in Wadsworth.
Where was the office in Wadsworth, Esther, when he headed here?
Well, it was in our home, which was the first home we lived in, was on College Street.
Where on College Street?
Well, just up from Kyle Street.
Just up from on the same side of the street?
On the same side of the street. You know, there's a business there on the corner right now of Kyle. I don't know what it is.
Well, it was the paint and varnish at one time. And I think there are motorcycles or something like that in it.
To my knowledge, that's what's there now. But that house right next, very close.
Immediately next to that.
Immediately next was our first residence. And I remember my father had an office upstairs in one room. That was his office, and his reception room was right inside the front door, the first room.
And I imagine your mother probably was the receptionist, is that right?
My mother helped him, yes. She helped him very much as his profession grew.
I would imagine that anyone who came in with a bad back would have a rough time getting up the steps.
It wasn't easy.
But they did it anyway because they went away feeling good. You left there how many years later and then went to North Pardee Street?
Let's see. We were there 2 years.
And then you went to North Pardee.
And then we went to North Pardee, and then we were on the corner of North Pardee and West Prospect.
West Prospect
that
for
home there. And that worked out better for my father. He had a room on the first floor, which was much better.
Yes, I remember that room on the first floor. I remember the room on the first floor. Then, as you continued your stay in Wadsworth, you became very active in Wadsworth. Went to school. You went to Central School, didn't you?
I did.
You went to Central School. And do you remember what year you started school? I think probably 1931, is that correct? It'd be 66 years ago.
That's right.
In 1931. And do you remember your first grade teacher, Esther?
I do.
Who was that?
Her name was Miss Carlson.
Miss Carlson. Do you remember anything about her? Was she married or was she single?
She was single. She was young and pretty,
Young and pretty. Now, that's
the way
extraordinary.
That's the way I remember her.
That's extraordinary because all first grade teachers to small children are 100 years old. I can remember a teacher, Abby Swain, one time being asked by her students. At that time, Abby probably was maybe 65 years old or 60. And the student said, "How old are you, Mrs. Swain?" And she said, "Oh, about 100. And the little second grader said, "Oh, no, you're not. You're not that old." She said, "Well, that's right. I'm only 80. Well, that's more like it." All kids think that they're teachers. And you're saying that Miss Carlson was a young, pretty teacher. That's wonderful.
That's the way I remember her now. At that time, I'm sure I looked at her as if she were old.
Old. And then do you remember going through school at Central School and who your teachers were, who your principal was, and anything that you remember about school?
I remember my second grade teacher, and she was Miss Knopf.
Lulu Knopf.
And she lived out on 261.
261, you bet.
And, for many years.
Lulu Knopf had every person in Wadsworth who's still alive, I think.
Probably.
She was a stern, tough teacher, wasn't she?
She was.
Very stern and very tough.
She didn't laugh a lot. She meant business.
And kids loved her, though.
Oh, yeah. She was kind,
yeah,
but she was serious.
She was tough. Everyone who talks about her says the same thing. And we have people here who are in their 80s who had Lulu Knopf. So she's been around for a little while.
I guess.
Then, after you went through school, that is the elementary school, you stayed in the same school building, didn't you?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
No. When we moved to North Pardee, then I went to Lincoln School.
Oh, you went to Lincoln School
from
first.
Third grade through sixth grade.
Ah, and who was the principal at Lincoln? Do you remember that?
Mr. Joachim. Well, he wasn't when I was there in the third grade, but then he was given that job.
That's Earl Joachim.
Principal.
Earl Joachim. And
Yes.
where is Earl Joachim now?
Oh, he's passed away.
Yes, he passed away. But his
Yes.
brother, Starling Joachim,
Yes.
still lives in Wadsworth.
Right.
And Star is probably 76 years old or something like that, is he not?
Yes.
You know Starling, of course, don't you?
I know him, yes.
Right. And do you remember your teachers at Lincoln School?
Yes, I was in third grade when I went there, and Miss Mills was...
Lottie Mills.
Lottie Mills, that was her name.
She was another one who was very tough.
Yes, she was, but she was also very kind and nice.
And the
She was a
fourth
good
grade teacher?
Somehow I don't remember the fourth
How about
grade
fifth?
teacher. No, the next one I remember was Mr. Joachim in the sixth grade.
In the sixth grade. He taught and he was also the principal. Then you went from there to now is Central Middle School, but at that time was the junior high school, or was it the junior and senior high school?
It was junior and senior.
And at that time, Mr. Work probably was still the principal.
He was.
Mr. Close was the superintendent.
That's right.
Do you remember the secretary's name, Mr. Close's secretary?
Mr.
Or even Mr. Work's secretary?
Well, let's see, the one I remember, I don't remember the secretary, but it's Mrs. Bergner, she was.
Donna Bergner, Donna Bergner Lind.
Yes.
She was, I think, clerk of the board, and she was in Mr. Close's office, I believe. And she was there for many, many years. Donna's still alive.
That's right.
She's up in years, of course, but she's very good shape.
Person.
Oh, yes, very good shape. We are now approaching the 8th grade. And you are out of the 8th grade and you're going to go into high school. Grade 9, correct?
Right.
That summer, what happened which was extremely significant to Esther Melvin?
Well, Wadsworth was going to be celebrating their 125th anniversary.
We called it the sesquicentennial, right?
Yes.
And what significant part did you play in that, Esther?
Well, I was queen of that celebration.
Queen of the celebration. How were you chosen?
Well, they had a contest, and they were selling tickets for the pageant, which was going to be, I don't know, I think it was 3 nights. And you could buy these tickets for the pageant, And on that ticket stub, you voted for who you would like to be queen. And then you turned these ticket stubs into the different businesses around town. And then they kept track on they had a chart, and they had a record there of who was getting the votes for this pageant. And so I ended up being the queen. And
How old were you?
I was 14.
14 years old, and your court was 15, 16, 17, and 18, right? How did you
Yes.
feel being this little kid in a high school, hasn't even started high school yet, who was already the queen of the Susquehanna? How did you feel about that? Because you have always been known as a very humble, reserved, kind, loving person who never pushed yourself into anyone's life who didn't want you.
Well, thank you.
Well, that's your reputation. And you probably were that way too. As a matter of fact, a little later on, I'm going to tell you something that someone called me and told me about you, which you're probably going to deny, but I'm sure it's true. And that has a great deal to do with your personality. So tell us about how you felt.
Well, I was thrilled.
Of course, any girl would be.
But I never, I mean, it was a fun thing, and I just enjoyed being with all these different girls, and I was also practicing for the pageant because they were having all these different performances, and you could join in any one of them that you thought you'd enjoy.
And which ones did you choose, Esther?
And I chose the matchstick drill.
Ah. What is the matchstick drill?
Well, we were dressed in these satin costumes. They were like silver gray, and they had an outsider come in and do this pageant for us and train us all what to do to entertain people. And we had caps on that covered your head, make it look like you were a matchstick.
A matchstick, because of, obviously with the matches having been built, that was the industry in Wadsworth at the time.
That's right, it was. And so that was the highlight of the pageant, was the match company.
Did you have...
So then after I didn't get to perform in it, then when I received the honor of being queen.
Queen. Mm-hmm. 1939 was another special year. Somebody moved to Wadsworth. Do you remember who that was?
Yes, I do.
Who was that person?
That was my husband.
To be.
To be.
To be.
That I didn't know about at that time, because I hadn't even met him.
But he knew you.
He didn't know me, no.
Well, received a phone call who knew that you were going to be on the program, and some people who were friends of his said that he took a little glance at this very, very cute little queen, and he set his cap for you. Does that ring a bell at all?
Yes, it does.
Can you tell us that fairy tale love story about that?
Oh, sure. Well, he was standing on the corner down by Brenneman's with his family, his mother and father and his two sisters. And I learned later, after we had met, I think I was a sophomore in high school before we started seeing each other at all.
He had already graduated from high school. No, he hadn't graduated from high school.
He was a senior.
He was a senior. Right.
Well, no, he was a junior because, yes, he was a year ahead of me in school.
Okay, he was a junior, and then he was going to be a senior the following year.
That sounds right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And anyway, he started walking me home. He watched me at band practice or orchestra practice, and then he would ask me if he could walk me home. So that's how we got acquainted.
And what were you playing in the orchestra?
I played the flute.
Flute. Mm-hmm. And did he play anything?
No.
Huh. Strange that he would be interested in the orchestra. But after he was on the corner of Brenny's with his mom and dad and two sisters, and we're going to be talking about mom, dad, and two sisters in a couple of seconds, but he saw you, right?
He saw me, and do you want me to tell you what he had said then?
Yes, I want you to tell me, because if you don't, I will.
Well, he told turned to his sisters, and mother and daddy said, "See that girl there in that float? I'm going to marry her someday."
That's right. He said, "I'm going to marry you someday." And he did. That is so reminiscent of the way that I met my wife. I met my wife on the East 9th Street Pier in Cleveland at a youth outing. We were going on the Good Time 2 ferry.
Oh.
And I saw her in a split second. I said, "I'm going to marry that girl." And I did 4 years later.
Is that right?
Yes. Now, his was more than 4 years, wasn't it?
Well, yes, it was after the war.
So we went from 1939 to 1947 that you were married. Is that correct? Or 46?
We were married in 46.
46. So that was 7 years. I was thinking of 7 years, and I said 47. 7 years after that you were married. And you were the heartthrob all these years.
Well, off and on.
Well, yes, off and on, right, because you had a lot of suitors, obviously.
Oh, well.
Now, Esther, let's hold that thought just for a minute and go to Charles Robert Danals, who came here in 1939 from?
They came here from Akron, but basically he had spent most of his life previously to that in the Mansfield area.
Mansfield, right. But the reason that he was in Akron was what?
His father was with the Erie Railroad.
Doing what?
He was a telegrapher.
And the telegrapher had his office where, usually?
Well, let's see, it's in one of those towers, along the railroad.
They no longer exist.
No.
But he then was assigned in 1939 to the Silver Creek Tower.
That's right.
The Silver Creek Tower happens to be very close to my neighborhood. As a matter of fact, where I live right now, if the Silver Creek Tower were still standing, I could see it off into the distance because that's down maybe a half mile from my home.
Yes.
And I remember Vernon Danals very well because he parked his car in my neighbor's garage and walked to the tower. Where the tower was a good a quarter of a mile from that garage, but you couldn't get down there by car and you had to walk down there. And I knew him very well. Your husband, they called him Chuck for a while, and then they start calling him Bob. Is that correct?
Mostly, yes, occasionally people called him Chuck, but most people called him Bob.
Bob in school. And he would come down to the tower, and I remember distinctly his stopping at talking to my older brothers who were in the same class or a year behind or ahead of him or whatever. So I remember that very well, but I never realized fully well that this young lad would do three things in life, all three of equal importance. One was to become a chiropractor himself. Two, to become the mayor of Wadsworth, and then the third most important thing that he did was to marry Esther Danals.
Well, that's debatable.
That's debatable. I don't think so, Esther. I don't think so. Now, Esther, how did it happen that A, he married you, and B, he became a chiropractor? They're all related, aren't they?
Yes. Well, he married me
because he loved you.
Yeah, he loved. Our friendship grew after he went in the service, and seemed like that saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And we wrote letters, and I went with his parents to visit him when he would come into port. He was in the Navy. And so our friendship just became closer through those World War II years, and that's how we got together. And through that period of time, being around my family and my father, he ask a lot of questions about chiropractic. And before he had decided to go into chiropractic, he thought he would like to be a coach. That was his dream. And then the more he got to thinking about the total picture, he decided to, after the war, to go to chiropractic college.
And where did he go?
Well, he started out in Cleveland at the Metropolitan College of Chiropractic, there for 2 years, and then 4 more years he went summer and winter so he could
Accelerate the program.
accelerate the program. And then he went to the National College of Chiropractic in Chicago.
Chicago, right. By that time, chiropractic had really expanded into a profession far beyond what your father, although he was absolutely outstanding, there's no question about that, but the training was not nearly so comprehensive as it was when your husband then went to chiropractic school. He started chiropractic school in about 1945, did he, or 46?
Let's see. You mean to college?
Yes.
Yes, he went, we were married in June, and he went in September. He started.
Okay, so 1946.
That's 46.
Those were tough years for the new doctor, or the new Bob and Esther Danals. Where did you live at that time?
Well, we lived in Cleveland on the east side when he was in college there, and it was not a very good neighborhood, and it's probably much worse today.
It is much worse today, there's no question.
And then we always came home every weekend because we couldn't stand to stay there.
Couldn't stand it. What did you do while you were there? You didn't sit home all day.
I worked. I got a job working as a secretarial job in the Terminal Tower in Cleveland.
Terminal Tower in Cleveland. You had to take a bus all the way into the Terminal Tower every morning and come home every night.
That's right. Western Electric is what I worked for.
He was there for 2 years, and then he went to Chicago. Did you follow him to Chicago?
Oh, you bet.
You bet. And there you did what?
Well, I was able to get a transfer with my company, Western Electric, in the zone office downtown in the Loop in Chicago. So there again, I rode on the elevated clear down to the Loop from out west
Quite a ways.
for about an hour.
Right.
And
It was not an easy 6 years for you.
well, at the time, it seemed rather rough, but we had good times too.
Of course.
Not much money to spend for fun. We'd
bet.
drive up and down Rush Avenue and down in the Loop area where all these different beautiful restaurants were from all the different countries. And
Just looked?
just looked. Never could go into them.
Never could go into them.
But we had a wonderful time. We just did all the free things when we had free time, go down to the lake.
At that time, you're talking 1946, automobiles were now then being manufactured once again. They were not manufactured from 1941 through 1945. 1946 was the first time. Did the car that you drove up and down the street in, was that a brand new car, or was that one of the cars that you got from somebody else?
It was a brand new car. When we were married, we were able to get a new Plymouth.
How much?
Through Jim Rich here at the Pontiac Olds, and we both put all our savings that we both had together to get that car, and we were so thrilled with that.
And I believe it cost about $925, didn't it?
Oh, something like that.
$925, brand new car. And that was a beautiful, was it a green car?
Oh, it was white.
White car?
I thought it was a white car. That's the way I remembered.
I remember people with their cars because my brother was in the automotive repair business for so many years, and I would remember, I thought there was a green car, but I could be wrong on that. Now,
I could be wrong too. But I was always fond of white cars, pretty much.
you liked a white car. He
Yeah,
graduated
I think it was.
and then in about 1951, did he not altogether?
Yes.
1951. And he came to Wadsworth, and what did he do?
Well, he went into practice with my father.
Right.
And,
And
then they expanded, and my father and my husband were together 8 years in the chiropractic office there.
at the present time, all of our medical bills are much more than they used to be. I can remember going to the doctor, and for maybe $2, you could have a visit. Now it's 30, 40, or 50, or 60. Do you remember what it cost to go to the chiropractor to have a back
Adjustment.
straightened out or adjustment? How much?
Yes, some time ago, just happened to see some records that my father had $1.50 for a treatment. That's what it started out.
$1.50 for a treatment. You can't
And then
get,
it worked up to about $3.
you can't get a parking place for that to go to the chiropractor right now. But that's what they did.
That's right.
8 years with your dad. Then what did your father do? Dr. Melvin, what did he do?
Well, he retired then, and you know, he was on city council too.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
He was the president of council.
He was a
like
president
your
of council.
Linda.
like my Linda, that's right. Now, in the years after retirement, Dr. Melvin, and we have to talk about Mom for just a little bit because she's very important. You know, she was part of the structure here where
right.
you came from.
Yes.
Who was your mother?
My mother, it was Irene Plant. She was a Plant.
P-L-A-N-T.
P-L-A-N-T.
Also from Pennsylvania.
From Pennsylvania, Jamestown, Pennsylvania.
Jamestown, Pennsylvania. And she has no relatives here in Wadsworth.
No.
And and your father has no relatives here in Wadsworth.
No.
You're the only offspring from the Melvin Plant relationship. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is that when somebody writes this history, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they'll wonder, did Esther Melvin have any relatives? And we want to be sure you have no blood relatives in Wadsworth at the present time except your children.
That's
and we're
right.
going to get to those in a couple of minutes too, because they have had some extraordinary lives as well. Going back then to after the 8 years that your husband at this time now is now Dr. Bob Danals, he went on his own.
That's
Did
right.
he change his office?
Yes, when our first son, decided to go into chiropractic, then the two of them discussed the office and decided that it would be wonderful to build a new clinic so they would have more room that they could expand.
And the new son, or rather the new chiropractor in the family now is Dr. Steve Danals, right?
That's right.
Also, just a wonderful person. We'll get to him. We want to talk about him a little bit, and we want to talk about Marcia Swell and others. But we have then Dr. Bob Danals working by himself for a few years before Dr. Steve becomes available, which was probably about 1970 something, right?
Yes, I think it was 1973.
73? Okay.
I might be off on that a year.
Steve was born in what, 48?
74 maybe. Steve was born in, let's see, 51.
51?
Am I thinking right?
51
Should have wrote that down.
would make him 46 years of age.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
and,
right.
and Marcia's younger.
51 and then 53 and 55 were their
53.
birth dates, my
Okay,
three children.
51, 53, and 55. All right. So he's 51, so he's 46 years old now. And in 73, he joined his father, Dr. Bob Danals and Dr. Steve Danals, and where was that? Where did they build their clinic?
On the corner of North Pardee and Boyer.
Oh, okay. It's far enough off North Pardee, so I was thinking that it wasn't right on North Pardee, but the parking lot is between the clinic and Pardee, right? North Pardee.
Yes, the parking lot's right on North Pardee.
Yes, but I mean, I was thinking the building's not right on North Pardee.
Well, yes. I mean, the parking lot's there,
Yes,
but
right,
their
yeah,
address
yeah,
is
the
Pardee, North Pardee.
So North Pardee, since 1931, has had chiropractors, right?
That's right.
1931. 67 years of chiropractors, approximately.
Approximately, yes.
67 years of chiropractors. Then, after they were together for a while, what did Dr. Bob Danals decide to do?
Well, he decided to slow down in the clinic and just maybe work a day or two.
Because by this
go
time,
semi-retired.
right, by this time, Dr.
Clinic.
Steve Danals was going full blast, doing a beautiful
Well
job.
established,
And I went to see him one time, and I'm a big boy, and Steve's a big boy. And we got these two big boys together on top of that table. I felt as if I had a dump truck on top of me, but boy, it worked out so beautifully. So he did a nice job.
the end result's what counts, isn't
That's
it?
right. The end results are what counts, is exactly right. How did he, quote, slow down, Esther?
I don't think he ever did.
Didn't slow down at all. Didn't slow
No.
down at all. What did he do?
No. Well, he was approached to see if he would consider running for mayor.
That's correct. And do you remember who approached him?
I do. It was Sterling Seacrest.
That's right. And Sterling was on this program, and he takes great credit for having done that. And that certainly, is to Sterling's credit that he was able to get someone who had been in medicine all of his life to become a candidate for mayor. And he won the mayor's race, did he not?
That's right.
And then he ran a second time, and he was unopposed. Is that correct?
That's right.
Then, unfortunately, as you were at Tangier at a meeting, he succumbed to a very disastrous heart attack and passed away. And that's been how many years now?
It'll be 7 years, 28th of September.
28th of September, 7 years. Seems like yesterday. Oh, boy. And a big void in North Lyman Street.
That's right.
Big void in North Lyman Street. People loved him as a chiropractor. I suspect that people who did not even know anything about his political life, had no idea at all what he was doing politically, went to his funeral thinking, well, he was my good chiropractor.
That's right.
And my mother would have been among them. She dead 24 years now, but she would have been among them. She wouldn't have cared anything about what he did politically, but he was a good chiropractor. He would go there. She would come out cured. She loved that. Do you remember any advice that his father gave him when he went into politics?
Yes, I did. I do. I remember his father said, I think you're making a mistake, Bob. He said, and when you get into politics, you can make a lot of enemies. And you'll lose friends.
And you lose friends. Well, I guess you make enemies, you lose friends. That didn't seem to bother Dr. Bob at all, because he did go into politics, and there is no question. Anytime that there is a contest between one side and another, we have 51% of the people on one side, 49 on the other. I don't care what decision you make, at least 49% of the people are going to be mad at you. But that's the way it is in politics. It didn't deter another member of your family from following those same footsteps. And who was that?
My daughter, Marcia.
Marcia Danals Lehman. Tell us about Marcia Danals Lehman.
Well, she's a fun-loving,
Oh, she's a great person.
people-related person. And
She is.
always through her growing up years, she was always helping the underdog.
Yeah, yep, that's right, exactly. She's the type of person who, if there were no people around to hug, she'd hug a telephone pole.
Yeah. She's like her father was always that way too.
Oh, he's very affectionate, yes.
Yeah.
The fact that Marcia is a council person in the 2nd Ward in Wadsworth presently right now would have made her father very happy, I'm sure. But he didn't live to see that, and that's regret. You have another child too. Who's that?
Yes, I have 3 wonderful children.
Yes, indeed you do.
Yeah, no.
Who's the third one?
That's Scott.
And what is Scott doing? Where is he?
Well, Scott is in North Carolina. He graduated from Miami University, and that's where Steve started out also. And he graduated in fine arts, and he's in the contracting carpenter business and helps build homes and furniture. He has his own workshop in the mountains in North Carolina, and they enjoy a wonderful life out with nature, and are raising 2 children that are really nice children also. And
Does the fact that they live in North Carolina in the mountains make it somewhat convenient for Grandma to go down to visit from time to time?
well, occasionally I get down there.
And it's a nice place to visit, isn't it?
It is. I love to go hiking, and I've always been a nature person myself.
Let's get back to Dr. Steve for a couple of minutes. He married a girl who has her own profession. What is that?
That's right. He married Debbie Johnson, Rush and Barbara Johnson's daughter, and
From Wadsworth.
From Wadsworth.
Tell us about Rush and Barbara Johnson, and tell us also when and how those two met for history's sake.
All right. Well, Barbara and Rush moved here. I might get this mixed up a little bit, but I think they came from Alabama through Rush's work. And Debbie was in high school with Steve, a year
You're behind.
behind Steve, and she decided to go to Miami University when she graduated.
I wonder why.
Well, that Steve had gone there. Well, they really didn't date that much
Did they?
in high school. But so when Steve learned that Debbie was coming to Miami, he said he'd be glad to show her around campus.
Oh, that was nice of
Get
Steve.
around.
That was
And
nice of
I think
Steve.
that's what started the flame between
The two of them.
the two of them.
Well, they certainly have done a beautiful job of letting that flame turn into a bonfire. They now live up on one of those, what is it?
Charles Court.
Charles Court. I knew where it was, but I don't know the name of it.
Cul-de-sac.
Cul-de-sac up in Charles
Straight.
Court.
Yeah.
And they have 2 lovely children.
No, they have 3.
Oh, 3.
3
Oh.
great sons.
I thought that there were 2, but I could be wrong. Yeah, well, I am wrong, obviously. There are 3 children, and they're teenagers. A couple of teenagers, aren't they? Are very close to it.
The 2 oldest are in high school now.
Yeah, teenagers.
Nathan is.
Now, what does Debbie do?
Well, Debbie's an interior designer.
And do you know of any municipal building in Wadsworth that she might have designed in terms of somebody's mayoral office?
Well, yes, she did. She's
Yes.
helped a lot around town in the different buildings, outside and inside.
What about her father-in-law's office? Did she design that? Or decorate it, I should say, decorate it.
The clinic?
No, the mayor's office.
Oh, the mayor's office.
Yes. Mhm.
Well, she helped to make it look more tastefully when they were in the old office.
Old office, right.
building.
Mhm. And it was very tasteful.
Right.
Anytime that anyone would go in there, the mayor would always say, now, I'm not capable of doing this kind of thing, but my daughter-in-law is, and
Oh.
you could tell that. It was very well done.
Yeah.
What are the other kinds of buildings and what other kinds of things has Debbie done in Wadsworth?
Well, she should be being interviewed for that part.
Oh, really?
I mean, I know some of the buildings that she has done, and the whole block of there on the corner of the square, she did the outside.
Where John Hanna is?
Where John Hanna is on that block, and then where the bakery is, and
All of John Hanna's. John Hanna's family owns the bakery too.
right. And also when picket fence was on the corner, she did the front for that one. And I think Amschutz, Amschutz, I think she helped with that. And then she did all the designing of Lou Perry's business up north of town.
That's what I was hoping that you would say. A very beautiful, beautiful
It is a
place.
beautiful building.
She has done a lot of work. She will go down probably as one of Wadsworth's best designers. And that brings another dimension into the Danals Melvin family. Esther, can we go back to you just for a little while? I told you that I received a compliment about you from one of your friends. I'm not going to tell you who it is now, but one of these days I might tell you, who said that probably one of the most unassuming, powerful women around because of her humility and her warmth and kindness, charitability, and she just had all the nice words that you can possibly think of. During the time that you were A, the chiropractor's wife, B, the mayor's wife, and so forth, how did you fit in without fitting in? Does that make any sense at all to you?
Just being myself.
Well, that's wonderful. That's a tribute right there, the being yourself. But how did you do it? I mean, what is that secret that everyone knows that you have of being a part of everything, but yet not a part of anything?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
You can't answer it.
I'm just.
Was it training from home?
I'm just myself. Well, my parents were wonderful parents, and I guess they always told me, take time to be friendly and speak to your elders, because it means so much, even if you just have a smile or a hello for them.
That makes the difference, doesn't it? It just makes the difference. How did you inculcate that with your 3 children?
Well,
all 3 are extremely friendly.
I think they get it from both sides because, well, we've always just been people related.
Oh, of course, you have to. I mean,
persons.
And for a chiropractor, I mean, boy, there's no one who is much more people-oriented because you go in there feeling horrible, you have to disrobe, and you get into the most awkward positions, and you have to put your 100% trust. So you have to have that.
You have to make people feel comfortable and at ease.
But do you remember when the kids were growing up, trying to train them to be the way they are, or that just came out?
Well, I just always said, be yourself.
Be yourself. Well, that was a good self to be. How about going back now just a little ways in your own life too, Esther, to, well, I guess, how am I going to say this so that it doesn't sound as if you thinked out, as the kids would say. There were some things that you really wanted to do in life, but you really gave prominence to your husband and to your family first. What would have been the things that you would have wanted to do if your dreams came true 100% and everything, if the world were perfect or whatever that is?
That's a big question. Well, I think basically my dream was to just be married and have a happy home life, and I liked that kind of a life.
You never became involved with the social set in Wadsworth particularly, did you?
No, I never liked being a leader particularly.
But you lead through your...
Just being myself, I don't know, I can't explain that, Caesar.
Well, I understand what you're saying. We have some pictures here which we're going to show, and we're going to show, first and foremost, some pictures of when this little 14-year-old cute little girl, now that's a sexist remark, and you can have me arrested if you want to, but she was a very cute little girl. We're going to show a picture of her, and there she is, and I bet you can name all of these people here, can't you? How about standing just for, put that in front of you, and can you do them upside down and tell us who those people are? These are people of your court.
Did you want me to stand?
Yes. No, you don't have to stand if you don't want, but
Okay.
can you see over there? You're kind of short.
No,
Okay.
let's see. Well, this one is Gertrude Glider and Jeanette Weinsheimer. Now, I'm saying their maiden names.
That's right. That's what we want.
And this was Pat Welsh. And Beatrice Mann right here.
Who's the next one?
And that was myself. And this is June Mackey. And I just had breakfast with her yesterday.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And this is Grace Blau and Martha Ray.
Martha Ray.
Yeah, Martha Ray.
Okay. Now, do you remember any of those married names?
Let's see. There's Jeanette Weinsheimer's last name is Kaler, K-A-L-E-R, and they moved to California. But I think he was a Wadsworth young man, but I didn't know him really. And then Pat Welsh Parmalee.
Parmalee.
She's a good friend, and Beatrice Mann Gorman. She's passed away.
Yes.
And June Mackey Sandals.
June Mackey Sandals.
And then myself.
Esther
Melvin Danals. And Grace Blau, I don't know what her married name is or was. And Martha Ray, I think she married a Beach from Seville, maybe Dr. Beach's son. And she was a sister to Ruth Ray Cox, Tom Cox's wife.
Right.
Now there's some others. They're not all in this picture. Isla Jean Leatherman, she's in this one, isn't she?
I think so.
Yeah, I feel like they should be a part of this today.
Well,
because there are two girls in Wadsworth still living here in Wadsworth.
Who are they?
That's Isla Jean Critchbaum Leatherman and Pat Welsh Parmalee.
Parmalee, right. Well, we would love to have them.
And June Mackey Sandals.
June Mackey Sandals is still living there, yes.
Right.
Now, this picture, I think that picture is particularly noteworthy, and this is in 1964, when we had our 150th anniversary. Who was the queen then, Esther?
That was Charlene Vorse
Clevedence?
Clevedence. Right.
Charlene Vorse Clevedence, and her date was, or her young escort was?
Her escort there was Bruce, I think it's Bruce Gilman.
Bruce Gilman. And right there, let's see, this would have been 25 years after you were queen. There is Esther Melvin Danals, still queenish looking, and her husband, Dr. Robert Danals, and you were promenading. And this is the last picture that Esther and Bob took. When was this taken? Do you remember?
It was in June of 1990.
June of 1990, and that was 2 years before he passed away, isn't it?
No, that was just
two months. 2 months before he passed away. June of 1990. And here is a picture of Dr. and Mrs. Melvin. That's mom and dad, right?
My mother and father.
Mother and father.
Right.
How old would your father be now, Esther, if he were living, and your mother?
Well, my mother would be 92 this year, and my father would be 100 and, say, 92. He would be 100.
100 years old. He was born 1897?
Yes, I think that's right.
1897.
He was about 8 years older than Mother.
Okay. Those are good pictures. We want to go now to a little bit of the political life of Dr. Robert Danals. And tell us, if you will, how he reacted to a completely different lifestyle. A lifestyle where, as you say, everyone loved him, to a lifestyle where he had to make decisions where someone might not care for him. How did he react to this?
Well, he didn't like to have people be upset with him.
No, none of us does.
But when you're in that kind of a situation, when you're wearing those shoes, you can't please everybody. And I think the way I felt like he really was trying to do the best he could for the most people in the community that he could, what was best at the time.
Do you remember any real traumas that he might have had during his, for instance, one mayor talked about the police strike. Another one talked about the big storm. But do you remember any traumas that he might have had?
You know, nothing comes to my mind right at the moment.
Kind of an easy, nothing extraordinary.
I can't think of any.
I think that it suffices to say, for the sake of history at this point, that at the present time, starting with H.J. Hall, who was the mayor in the 30s, we have had on our program his son, Jack Hall, who's now the treasurer of the City of Wadsworth. And following him, the only other living mayors we have are Earl Gottwald and Don Merriman. Well, Don Merriman first, I guess, and then Earl Gottwald. I'm sorry, Don Merriman, J.D. Henson, Earl Gottwald. Don Merriman is still living. But
Right.
Don is probably in his mid-90s or close to it, and he didn't feel that he wanted to be interviewed because it would be just too hard on him at the present time.
Oh.
J.D. Henson is 80 years old, and he's in wonderful shape, and he came down, and we had a very good interview. We were not able to interview the only person who, well, not the only person, but the only person in recent history who had 2 terms, and they were split terms at that, and that was Earl Gottwald, because Earl's health isn't bad, is very precarious at the present time. We are trying to get Eileen Gottwald in to tell us about the career that Earl had. We've had a few people who knew Earl when he was in the clothier business, and they've been able to tell us about Earl, but we don't have too much about his mayoral days. And unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, whichever we want to say it, we do have you. Unfortunate because we didn't have the mayor, but fortunate that we do have a person who was so close and such an integral part to be able to give us the life of Dr. Robert Danals, who then became Mayor Danals for 2 terms in the city of Wadsworth. History will record the fact that Dr. Danals left the practice but kept the practice even while he was mayor. I think that during the time that he was mayor, he would spend, what, half-day a week or something like that.
Something
he kept his hand in it all the time.
That's right. He
And
loved it.
He loved it. I was going to say, not so much because his son couldn't handle it, but because he loved it so much.
That's right.
Dr. Steve Danals, your son, has something in his office from your father which he cherishes and which he shows people. Do you know what that is? It's a piece of machinery that they had some 70 years ago or 60 years ago in chiropractic. I don't know what the name of it is, but I know that they use it for adjustments or something. And the few times that I've been in there, he has taken a great deal of pride. The reason I mention this, Esther, is that there are many unsaid things that kids have in their hearts. And I'll be willing to wager that there are 3 or 4 unsaid things that 2 of your kids have in their hearts, and Steve particularly. And that is that Grandpa and Dad actually set him on a course which will be his life career, and he will never forget that. He has that piece of machinery from Grandpa, but the one thing that he has, which no one will be able to take from him, is that the mayor of Wadsworth came over and adjusted backs right alongside of him. And that wonderful daughter of yours, Marcia Lehman, will think to herself, Dad gave me this inspiration, and my only regret is that he can't be here to see it. Esther Danals, we want to thank you very, very much for an excellent interview. You've been so helpful and so good. 3 ways that you were powerful in this community. 1, on your own. 2, through your association with the mayor. And 3, with your wonderful children. Thank you. And we hope that we have many, many years of Esther Danals in Wadsworth.
Thank you.
Hello, Wadsworth. Roger Polk from The Ultimate Game here to remind you to clear your calendars. Saturday, October 6th from 8 to 2 is Wadsworth Bone Marrow Registry Day, as declared by Mayor Caesar Carino and the City Council. We are going to attempt to get as many citizens of Wadsworth as we can out to the Wadsworth First Church of the Nazarene on the corner of High and Browse, Saturday the 6th from 8 to 2 to get registered into the National Bone Marrow Registry so that we can save a life for someone either in our local community or throughout the United States. This is operated by the American Red Cross. All they're going to do when you come out, it's a very quick procedure. You fill out a consent form. They'll take a small vial of blood. They'll type it and put you in the registry. So we're counting on you, Wadsworth. As many as we can. Let's shoot for 1,000. We don't know how many to expect. Let's try to get as many as we can from Wadsworth. We'll see you October 6th.